So, 18% of those who think that former President Trump should be charged and face criminal charges say that they would, in fact, vote for him in 2024. Huh. What does that say about Joe Biden? So a poll was released by ABC Washington Post, and yeah, let's just go ahead and say that the crew at ABC was completely dumbfounded by the results of it. But I just want you to know right now that this clip that I'm about to show you is roughly 3 minutes long. I'm going to be explaining what is probably really and truly going on as far as this poll is concerned and the actual results. So make sure you guys stick around for the full video. Also, something else too, I'm also going to explain to you why it is that it's probably an outlier. And to go on top of that, while it is positive, I would not get my full hopes up, but I'm going to kind of realistically break down what's more than likely going on in this one. So yes, a pure political video from John Claymore, so make sure you guys stick around for the full piece. Let's go ahead and roll this.
This poll is just brutal for President Biden.
Absolutely, George. And you talked earlier about that record low approval rating for President Biden. It's actually 6 points down just since February. And the skepticism over his leadership extends deep inside his own party. Only 36% of Democrats think that their party should nominate Joe Biden for a second term. 58% say they would support someone else or prefer someone else. That's despite the fact that the entire DNC, most of the Democratic establishment, has rallied behind President Biden. And you're seeing real weaknesses in the coalition that powered Joe Biden to the presidency back in 2020. Biden carried independents by 13 points against Donald Trump. He is now trailing Trump by 9 points among those same voters. He carried black voters by 75 points in 2020. Now he is up just 35. That may sound like a lot, but the fact of the matter is, in modern politics, that is not the kind of number that a Democrat needs to be victorious. And then, of course, that does spill over into the head-to-head matchup, the hypothetical rematch, Trump versus Biden. Right now, a 7-point edge in our poll from in Trump leading Biden. And in fact, it's an identical number with Ron DeSantis in a head-to-head that might happen next November. That tells us at this very early stage, George, that this race is shaping up a lot more about the incumbent president, Joe Biden, than it is about any of his challengers.
And Rick, as I mentioned with Senator Langford, President Trump, at least right now, appears to be strengthening his hold on his front-runner status for the Republican nomination.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We've seen Donald Trump's numbers go up in the last couple of months across a range of polls, and most of the other candidates either going down or staying around the same. Ron DeSantis at 20%. Of course, that is not even half Trump's total right now. Everyone else in the single digits. That includes our ABC News contributor Chris Christie, who's considering a run of his own. He's at 1% in this poll. And when we ask people to focus in on the top candidates, to choose just among the top contenders, you actually see Trump's number go up a little bit. Ron DeSantis does as well, but still, he's nowhere near where Donald Trump is across the country. The other candidates, again, still in the mid or low single digits. And this is interesting because despite all of that, despite the strength that we're seeing for Donald Trump right now, a strong majority of Americans think he should be facing criminal charges across a range of investigations, including on this one. 56% say that he should face charges over his attempts to overturn the 2020 election. What's interesting to me about this, George, is that even among that 56%, the people that think that, yes, Trump should face criminal charges, 18% say they would vote for Donald Trump over Joe Biden anyway. That tells you a lot about Trump's potential strength, but maybe more than that, some of Biden's weaknesses. And that question of age that you mentioned earlier that Joe Biden has been trying to address. Donald Trump is less than 4 years younger than Joe Biden, but the concerns over Biden's age are much more significant. 68% of voters say they think that Joe Biden is too old for an additional term. Only 44% say the same about Donald Trump.
Rick, I got to admit, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. You've got 1 in 5 people who say they believe President Trump should face criminal charges, but they'd still vote for him?
It is remarkable, and I do think once there's a matchup with an actual person, maybe that changes, but that just tells you about how much Trump is kind of baked into the political equation.
Okay, guys, let's go ahead and talk about the biggest elephant in the room, at least as far as I'm concerned. Now, really quick, before we go any further. ABC, Washington Post notoriously do not have good polls. Okay, I don't know if this is some PSYOP poll or what. I personally think that what it is that the percentages are off by a little bit. And what I mean by a little bit for ABC standards, that means it's probably a lot. Now, do I think that former President Trump is on top of Joe Biden by 7 points nationally? No, I would say for the most part, it's probably 2 or 3. Do I think that Ron DeSantis is on top 7 points over Joe Biden? No, I do not. I believe it's closer to 2 or 3, maybe even tied. And I'll explain that more later on in this video, because the whole DeSantis thing is, I think, a lot of things that people are not mentioning, a lot of people are not looking at when it comes to him. But there's some things in this poll that are, in fact, possibly outliers. For example, you guys saw where apparently Joe is only at like plus 35 with black voters. Well, let me go ahead and kind of break that down for you. I don't think it's plus 35 with black voters. I think it's probably more along the lines of like plus 45 or plus 55. I think they're off by a good deal. Let me give you an example of ABC Washington Post polls. In the 2020 election, they released a poll roughly a week before the election itself saying that Donald Trump was losing the state of Wisconsin by 17 points. Donald Trump lost the state of Wisconsin by roughly 20,000 votes. That altogether is only like 0.3%. It's not a whole lot. As a matter of fact, if you get beyond all the narratives and everything, Trump only lost the election technically by 43,000 votes within 3 states. So in 2020, it actually turned out to be a much, much closer election than you might would think, because we elect our presidents through the Electoral College. When you have a state like, say, California, where you have roughly potentially 20 million voters, and of course, roughly there's going to be about 7 million more Democrat voters total, or people who are going to vote Democrat, which in that election, I think it was right around 5.5 million total. Yes, it's probably going to make the popular vote easier for Democrats to win. Now, I've already given my take in previous videos on the Electoral College. I believe it needs to stand, because you don't want cities like New York or Los Angeles deciding who your president is, because, let's be honest, these are urban centers, and a lot of these politicians, they would only have to go to urban areas to campaign where they would already have their vote to begin with, and they're kind of leaving out the rest of rural, small-town America. You know, the parts of America that actually make America run, because the blue areas, for the most part, especially blue cities, are consumer areas, whereas the red areas and purple areas are more producer areas, if you guys are kind of pick up on my gist. So, the thing is this right here. There may be a lack of overall approval in the African-American community or the black community towards Joe Biden, because they view him as being, how do I say this, he's not Obama. Okay, if it was Obama in office, they would more than likely be at like, they'd be like probably like plus 75, plus 85, maybe even more than that. Now, I do think the Democrats are probably doing this to try to use whatever pull they can to get Biden out of the nomination spot, because right now they're not running primaries. They've actually decided to shut this entire thing down, and to go on top of this, they've chose to move the first caucus to South Carolina rather than leaving it in Iowa. I wonder why. This was kind of what I've said before in previous videos. I think their goal is to eventually maneuver Kamala Harris to the nomination. That's just my personal take. What I think that they're actually doing is they want to actually angle her there. Also, I mentioned in the video on what was going on in Chicago with the riots and why it was reminiscent of 1968, that I felt that what they were looking to do was run on an ultra woke platform. Remember, Chicago now has a new mayor who's actually a lot more woke than Lori Lightfoot. So right off the bat, you may be thinking to yourself, okay, it's pretty obvious that they're going to be catering to the whole minority bird, especially now with the whole border crisis and what's going on there. They obviously have their voters. The problem is that all these voters or would-be voters are being sent to only blue areas in blue cities. So I could see a situation where Democrats could possibly win the popular vote, but actually lose the election in an electoral landslide. And of course, that's going to bring up that whole argument about electoral college versus the popular vote. Yeah, it's going to be an argument again. But you see, the thing about black voters is this here. They probably think that Biden has not done enough as far as getting what he promised done, so a lot of them are probably turned off. Now, does that mean they're going to be voting for Donald Trump? Hell no, they won't be doing that there. Trump will probably, or DeSantis will probably make some gains in that community. Probably, I'd say if you go from 13% based on 2022, 11%, and was probably going to be a moderately lower turnout election in 2024, I would say maybe 15 to 16%. That's more than likely going to flip Georgia back. It's more than likely going to keep North Carolina in place, and it may be enough with the white vote to, believe it or not, turn a state that went to Biden by 10 points, that state being Virginia, or at least making it a lot closer. I know it sounds a little bit unrealistic, but please bear with me. Also, something else to consider is that there's a lot of crime going on in a lot of these major cities. Now, Martha Raddatz, she did a deal where she actually went into Philadelphia, and I think she went to, I can't remember what university it was, but she went and spoke to people. The only one person could actually say that they would support Joe Biden in 2024, and it was a state representative, a Democrat state representative in the state of Pennsylvania. So it sounds to me like it was pretty obvious that you were going to get that type of answer. By the way, I'll leave the Martha Raddatz piece. I'll try to find that and leave it in the description box for you guys. I advise you guys go check it out. It's only about a minute and a half long. The whole thing about, let's see, young voters, well, you got to understand something about 2020. We had a pandemic going on. Now, Trump got 74.2 million votes, and like I said, we have to keep things, let's just say we have to keep it, there's certain words we cannot use on this platform, but let me say this right here. Of 81 million votes that Biden got, I would argue that anywhere between 5 to maybe even 11 million votes were people who had not voted in previous elections or did not intend on voting in 2020 for the Democrat or the Republican, or they may have even intended on voting for Donald Trump, but they felt because of the states they lived in. Remember, Pennsylvania was being controlled by a Democrat governor, also Michigan, Wisconsin, and these states for the most part were locked down. Maybe they thought, okay, well, look, more than likely Biden won't win, but we'll just vote for Biden anyways, because if we do that, maybe the governors will actually work with him and we'll get back our freedom. It's pretty obvious that the gridlock, I would say, like I said, a good portion of those votes were good old-fashioned break the gridlock votes. It was something that Republican voters would have had the advantage of in 2012 if the Tea Party had shown up, but they did not show up. And of course, a lot of that was on Mitt Romney, not exactly, extending an olive branch to the Republican establishment. That's one of the main reasons why that election was lost. And you see this number, like 18% of the people who thought that Trump should face criminal charges would, in fact, what was it, was saying that they would still vote for him anyways. Yeah, that one's kind of weird, but I'm going to go ahead and break that one down for you. So it looks like Joe is not getting the gridlock vote. He's not getting that vote at all. That's a massive drop in overall voter support, not to mention the fact you've got elements of the far left, the more progressive vote, that is not happy with him. And then you compile the fact that he is being primaried by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Let me go ahead and put it this way here. Anytime a president receives a primary challenger that is actually doing very, very well in polls, at least as far as polling against them or taking a good piece away, it typically tends to lead to what we would call historical landslides, meaning that the incumbent president would get absolutely gobsmacked in the Electoral College. Why in the world would 18% say that they would still vote for Trump? Well, I think a lot of these people are probably pissed off with Biden. Okay, and why in the world would they be pissed off with Biden? Because you promised them a whole bale of stuff, but the minute you got in office, what did you do? You tried to throw a vaccine mandate in there. You tried to, the inflation rates through the roof. Even though Rasmussen Reports has Joe Biden's approval rating at 48%, which I find very weird. But then again, when you actually sit back and think about it, it's not really weird at all. Barack Obama, when he was in office, his approval rating was between 44 and 48%. Now, why in the world would it be between 44 and 48%? Well, if Obama was, not doing anything and he was just being his good old-fashioned lazy self, people thought that he was okay. People actually liked him. In the case of Biden, it seems to me to be the exact same thing, but seeing how you had, let's say you had a few shootings this past weekend, and of course they're running with the whole white supremacy shtick again, I'm pretty sure that Biden is going to try to do some type of gun control push here in the near future and probably try to get some rhinos to go along with it. That's what I'm saying is that I expect his approval rating to probably go down. Like I said, Rasmussen has him at 48%, but ABC does not. Now, as far as people choosing Trump, especially given the fact that they want him to go face criminal charges, but yet they're going to vote for him anyways, I'm a Trump voter. And I'm kind of like, okay, well, maybe it isn't that odd. You see inflation. You see the fact that the Biden administration continues to tell us that they're creating a lot of jobs, even though about 3/4 of those jobs were just simply people going back to work. Actually, it was 2/3 people going back to work after after the lockdown. And then you have another subsection of jobs that were added, people adding second jobs, which, by the way, was kind of a moniker of the Obama administration. He would tell you that we're creating jobs, but in reality, what was really going on was that people were taking out part-time jobs to have that second job to make ends meet. I know this because I worked 2 jobs twice in that time frame. So a lot of people are not exactly, believing the shit that Joe Biden is trying to shovel in their face. The reality of the situation is much, much different than what the administration is preaching. And I think what's happening is that a lot of that 81 million vote coalition is saying, look, we're just going to stay home. They're not commenting. They don't want to say anything. And look, we're just, we just don't want to support him in the next election. if Trump's on the ballot, we'll stay home. He can only be in for one term. What the hell could he do? What the hell could he not do? I'll explain that portion to you guys now. That one term that he can serve is the reason why I'm so bullish on Trump 2024, not to mention the Senate map favors Republicans heavily. You could have yourself what we call a very good overall mandate, and I think the country needs reforms. In the case of DeSantis, one of the reasons why I think DeSantis should wait, and I've also been somewhat anti-DeSantis on this platform trying to call him out, because when you actually dive into the record, and DeSantis is going to come up a little bit later on this week, because we're going to be talking about the Jazz Jennings-Tim Pool situation, in which DeSantis and his campaign had kind of a very, very weird answer back to him, even though Tim was, in my opinion, I thought was wrong on the issue. Don't worry, we'll talk about that later on this week. The thing you have to understand is this here. A lot of people who are pushing this DeSantis thing are basing this upon his record in Florida. Now, guys, supposedly there's like a 6-week abortion ban, even though he's not actually signed a 6-week abortion ban. Supposedly there's a permitless carry or constitutional carry is set to be signed. They're saying he got that done, yet it's not actually been signed into law. A lot of crap about him is completely overrated. It seems to me like they're trying to pad his resume just to get him to run, so that way he can say, I got this done in the state of Florida. You did not get this done on the national stage, when in reality, when Trump was in office, there probably wasn't really a way he was going to get anything done, because he only had 52 senators, and he barely had the support of his own Congress, because they were probably expecting Hillary Clinton or Ted Cruz. Sometimes Congress can work that way. If they don't like you, they're going to find a way to throw your agenda under the bus, especially in your first term. If they do that, that means that they did not want you to get reelected for a second term. Funny how politics work. Yes, there is a Republican swamp to go along with the Democrat swamp. It's insane. It's crazy. It's very deep. While I do believe some of the numbers that did come out, here's the problem. It's not by that much. He is not leading by 7 points. It's probably by 2. Biden, it being plus 35 with blacks, I think that's a little bit of an underlier. I think it's probably closer to plus 60, plus 65. When we get closer to the election, depending on who the Democrat nominee is, it's probably going to be plus 75, plus 80. I would take this poll right here with a grain of salt. There's obviously some movement going on here, but I would not fully buy into this poll. With that there being said, guys, John Claymore, this will be the last video of the day. It's going to come out roughly 7 o'clock tonight. There will be a video out this afternoon on a short time of prepping. It's about the accusations, now having a few days to kind of think about things, with Pooty Poot accusing the United States of, let's just say, what happened with the Duma being bombed. So make sure you guys stick around for that video there. Guys, make sure you guys leave a like, subscribe, share. I'd like to get you guys' thoughts, and I'll see you guys later.